The help of Hashem, we are learning Sukah Daf Lamed Hey. We left off on Daf Lamed Hey on the top of the Amid. We are beginning with, firstly, quoting a Braisa, as we had in the past, that is going to try to identify how do we see from the Psukim itself that the Pri Eitz Hadar means the Esrog tree. The Rishonim speak out, the Ritva speaks it out over here, that of course we know that the Esrog is an Esrog, or the Pri Eitz Hadar is an Esrog, because we are taking that which our parents took. We have the Torah Shebal Peh, but we are attempting to find a source of it, or at least a remez of it, in the Torah Shebachsav. The Gemara is going to focus on why is an Esrog of an Arla tree puzzle, and as we just quoted recently, true that Arla is not only Asr Ba'achila, it's also Asr Ba'hana'ah, but we're speaking about a mitzvah, and based on the rule that mitzvah lav lehenois nitnu, l'cha'ura, there should be no problem taking an esrog of Arla, and we're going to have two approaches, and these two approaches will be used to explain not only the esrog of an Arla, but in the whole daf today, we're going to be going back to these two sources. And one approach will be, and here are the words, Lefi she'ein bo heter achila. True, you can have hana'ah, but the Torah says by an esrog ulakachtem lochem, and something which is not permitted for consumption cannot be called lochem. That's approach number one. Approach number two, and here are the words, Lefi she'ein bo din mamoin. That being that it's Arla, so therefore the owner has no monetary jurisdiction over it. We'll explain these words better. According to some Rishonim, if something is Asr B'Hana, it becomes Hefker-like. Here where you will see, Rashi doesn't go that far. But it's not about that you are not allowed to eat it. Since you don't have any monetary balabatishkeit over it, that's the meaning of Ein Ba Din Mamain, so therefore Rashi holds it's also not considered lochem. And we will speak out in the Gemara and in Rashi, the nafkamina between these two approaches, but either of these are enough to explain why a esrog of an Arla tree is going to be puzzle. And from that, we're going to go into an esrog of Meiser Sheni. We're going to go further into what's going to be the din of matzah of Meiser Sheni, what's going to be the din of a dough that's made out of grain of Meiser Sheni, whether it's chayiv and challah or not. We're going to be speaking about the machlokes Beishamai and Beisilo that comes up every now and then, whether an ani is obligated to separate the mai, or whether, like Shitas Beisilo, if someone, God forbid, is an ani, they are allowed to eat the mai as it is. And basically, the whole daf is going to be going through the Mishnah that we learned on Daf Lamed Dalid Amid Beis, going through almost every single case and explaining it. You know, Bachlal Hadar is not only the name of the esrog, but it's a Hadar. Hashem's Torah is Pashat beautiful. It's going to be a Gavaldik Daf. Let's start. Tana Rabbanan, top of the Amid. Pri Eitz Hadar, as it says in Parshas Emor, says the Braisa, that's already a remes to the esrog, because Eitz, Pri Eitz, comparing the Pri to the Eitz to the Pri, meaning Eitz, a tree, Shetam Eitzoi, that the taste of its wood and the taste of its fruit are the same. Now let's appreciate that what's unique about the esrog is that the rind is very thick. The truth is, as many point out, that even take, let's say, a lemon tree. If you were to taste the bitterness of the rind, that white pulp, that white substance in between the peel and the pulp, it's going to have the same bitter taste as the eitz, as the wood of the tree, but there's very little rind. So the peri must refer to the pulp. Since the esrog has a very thick layer of rind, so we will, yes, consider that the fruit of the esrog, and it's bitter like the wood, and that's unique. So indeed, tam eitzoi utam piri yeshava, and hava oim is the esrog. And now the Gemara is going to interrupt. And point out that there is one other fruit that has the same quality. Maybe it's peppercorns. We're speaking not about the big peppers, but that which we use as spices. Now I know that they're very little, but they also the corn and the wood, the bush, the little low bush where they grow from, also has the same taste. And where do we know that from? We're looking not for the Metzias, but we're looking for the Torah. Kidetanya, Hoya Rav Meir Omer. Rav Meir continuously says, Mimash Mashanemar, he's quoting a pasuk in Kedoshim regarding the Isur of Orla. Unetatem kol eitz, that when you will plant any tree, that the first 3 years, va'araltem, right, that the fruits are considered arla. So any yodeya shehu eitz meichel. So matamad loimer eitz meichel. Why did the Torah have to write unatatem kol eitz machol? Answers Rabbi Meir that this comes to include even that eitz shatam eitzoy upiriyoi shava. And what is that referring to? That goes to pilpulin. In other words, one might have thought, that's a whole different sugya, we're going to have this also concerning brachas, that if something grows on a very low bush, one might have thought that it has the category of a vegetable. And if that would be the case, obviously, chevra, there is no din arla by vegetables. So the Torah writes the words machal to include that even peppercorns are included in the isur of arla. Lalam decha shal pilpulin chayavin ba'arla. And now another limud, and you should also see from here that there's nothing lacking in Eretz Yisrael. The Ein Eretz Yisrael chaseir klum, and it's according here a pasuk in Ekev where it says lo yisechsar koil ba. Nothing is missing in it. Bottom line is, you see from a chazal that pilpul and that peppercorns, that corn, the taste, the sharpness or the bitterness is mamish similar to the wood from which it grows. So what's the kasha? If you're looking for a remes pri eitz hadar, the eitz pri should be the same. Maybe take a peppercorn. So says the Gemara, no, that can't be. Because Hassan, meaning over here, by the esrig, mishum de lo yefshin. You cannot properly fulfill the mitzvah if this would have meant a peppercorn. Why not? Because heichi navid, how exactly would you take it? If you're going to take it one, as we learned yesterday, pri, not peiros, pri is one esrig, nin koit chada, so le minkara liki chasa, you won't be able to notice that you took it. And it doesn't not mistaber that you're taking something that's so little that no one sees that you're taking it. And if the solution would be to take a bunch of peppercorns, nin koit treyoit lasa, that can be, because either the gear says echad amar rachmana, or here in Mesoidas Hashas, pri echad amar rachmana, and as we learned, v'lo shnayim u'shloisha, peiros. So because of this issue, yes, we can still rely on this remes, ta'etz, shatam eitzoy, upiriyoi shaven, if throughout the entire creation of Hashem's world there's only either the pilpulin or the esrig, here it must be referred to the esrig, hilkoch lo yefshin. Anyways, that is the Tanakama's remes, that pri eitz adar refers to an esrig. Weiter in the Braisa, Rebbe Yoimer, I'll tell you another remes, that al tikra hadar, which means beautiful, elo hadir, a deer, a pen, a corral, right, an area in which you gather, let's say, sheep. And the tree is a tree which is considered like a pen, like a corral. How is it compared to the deer? Ma deer yesh b'gedolim uktanim. You have different sizes of animals, small animals, big animals. Tamimim, balimumin, hachinami, the esrek tree, yesh b'gedolim uktanim, tamimim balimumin. And here again, the Gemara interrupts. How can the Braisa say that that's unique to the esrek tree? Frek the Gemara, atu shar peiris leis v'hu gedolim uktanim, tamimim balimumin. Every tree has that. Some fruits are big, some fruits are small. Some are good fruits, unblemished. Some are blemished fruits. So the Gemara says you're right. The tmimim and balimumim you have in every tree, but the gedolim uketanim, as we are understanding it, is unique to the esreg. Elohachi ka'amar at sheboyim ketanim, that when the new crop arrives, adayin gedolim kayamin, the fruits dafka by an esreg that already grew last year and therefore now are very large, they're still on the tree. And as the Kapis Tamarim speaks out, we mentioned this yesterday, that all other fruits other than the esrog, there comes a certain point when they are fully mature that either they will naturally fall off the tree, and even if they remain on the tree, it's to their detriment. And that's again because all fruits other than the esrog, even if there is a rind, it's very, very narrow. The fruit means the pulp, the juicy fruit, that has an expiration date for it to be on the tree. Since the pulp of the esrog is minimal, we don't count that. The fruit of the esrog is the rind. Dafke, because the rind is hard, not only does it not lose by it remaining on the tree, Adarabba, it benefits from it being on the tree every season, adds something to the quality of the esrik. And therefore, the Gedolim are on the tree when the Katanim, when the new crop is beginning to come out. Another limud, Rababo Amar, Al Tikra Hadar, don't read Hadar as beautiful, Ella, with a patach under the hay, Hadar. Hadar also means that dwells. Now this limud will be similar to Rebbe, but he's just going to teach the word hadar differently. Dar meaning that davar shedar be'ilanim mishana l'shana, the fruit that gets to live on the tree for the entirety of the year, throughout all of the seasons. Ben Hazai Yomer, al tikrei hadar, ella, here we have in the parentheses, idur, whether it's with an aleph, whether it's with a hay, it fits better in the Mesoides, and the Aruch he quotes on the side, with a hay, but it's a chidik. Hidur means water. Meaning, Shekain, Beloshin Yavani Koren Lamayim Idur. Idur means water. And how does that connect to the esrek? The Ezu, he. What fruit? From all the fruits. Shegadal al kol mayim. Now, certain things live properly, develop properly only on rainwater. Certain things need to be irrigated, but chevra, overwatering is also not good. Those products, whether it's grains, legumes, whether it's fruit, if they need irrigation, they don't benefit from rainwater. They grow in irrigation water. The only fruit in Hashem's world that needs both, you need to have both rainwater and natural, man-put water, irrigated water, that's called kol mayim. It needs all the waters. Hava oim is a esrik. It's good to remember that. In other words, a person cannot say now with technology, I can give all the water that it needs. Not every place is good for the esrek. It needs to have both rain and irrigated and man put water and irrigation, and that's unique about an esrek. So here we have a compilation of all different remazim, how we know from the pasuk pri eitz hadar that it refers to the esrek. And now we're going back to the Mishnah. So the Mishnah wrote, shel hasheda v'shel iran idachas pasul. This continues the symmetry between the esrek and that which the Mishnah mentioned by going backwards, the arava and the hadas, and then the beginning of the perik lulav. And here the reason, the explanation is going to be all the same. And my tama meaning, like we spoke out, mitzvah, lav lehenois nitnu. True, anything that's used in idol worship is asur to derive benefit from it, asur bahana, but it should not take away the validity of a mitzvah. So the Gemara answers, you're right. It's not because it's asur bahana, but since dafka the ashera and that which grows in the irani dachas are destined to be burned, kivin de l'sreifa koi, and therefore we view it as if it's already burned, and therefore, and not that it's burned so it's not existent. It's burned so it doesn't have a shiur. Katuse michata shiure, its measurement is pulverized. And there is a minimum size for the esrek, whether it is ke'egois, as we learned in the Mishnah, keshitas Rabbi Meir, whether it is kebeitza, keshitas Rabbi Yehuda. It's an amazing concept, just to speak out what everyone should be thinking about. If it's considered burned, so it's not only that it doesn't have the shiur. If it's burned, then it's non-existent. If it's existent, then it has the shiur, but no, that's the way the Torah looks at it. It's existent enough. The only thing is it's lacking the shiur, because as far as the shiur is concerned, it's considered pulverized. Okay, right. And this chevra, again, this will be the main theme that we're going to have on Daf Lamed Hey, and it's going to begin when the Gemara is going to analyze the next din in the Mishnah, that if the esrek came shel orla, right, so then the din is that puzzle. And again, my tama, just like my tama and ashera in irani dachas is true that orla is even asur bahana'a, but so what? Mitzvahs lav lehenois nitnu. So what would be the problem of you taking a esrek from an orla tree? So here the Gemara says, Pligiba Rab Chia bar Oven, just to be the hoyer that here on the side he brings that it's just Rebbe Chia, but we're going to quote it as it's written here. So Pligi bar Reb Chia bar Oven and Rebbe Asi. Chad Omar, that the issue is Lefi she'ein bo heter achilam, since it's not permitted for consumption. And so what? So what that it's not permitted for consumption? So Zok Rashi around 20 lines from the top of the Amid, and let's keep a finger in Rashi. Verachmana Amar Lochem. The issue is the lochem. Lochem means haroi lochem b'chol darkei hana'asoi. In other words, it has to be completely suitable for you to use. So if it's not completely suitable for you to use because you can't even eat it, so it's not lochem. That's reason number one. And the other one of these two, which means, now guys, here is very important. Din mamin means that the owner, in Yiddish, in Lashon Kodesh, the owner has no balabatishkeit over it. Right? The owner has no monetary jurisdiction over it. And look inside Rashi, around 22 lines from the top of the Amid. And therefore what? What's what he doesn't have any monetary balabatishkeit over it. What does that mean? Says Rashi, she'eino shava pruta. Because halachically, it doesn't even have the value of a pruta. Why doesn't it even have a value of a pruta? Because it's asur bahana. So therefore, hilkach loy shalochem. This is a very much quoted Rashi, because we have it throughout, for example, in the Darim, we learned this in the Darim, when a person makes a neder that this thing that I own is asur on me even bahana'a. Can another person take it? We learned that another person can even take it. Because if something is asur bahana'a on me, according to some Rishonim, not this Rashi, that automatically means I don't even own it at all. It's not mine anymore. Because if I can't have any usage of it, it's not even mine. Rashi clearly doesn't hold so, because Rashi is emphasizing not that it's not mine. Rashi is writing because since it doesn't have shava pruta, so you can't call it lochem, which is not as far as saying that it's hefker. So avada, if asur bahana means it's not yours, for you it's like hefker, and arlets for everyone like hefker, then of course it's not lochem. Even if you're not going to take isur hana so far to say that the one who cannot have hana loses all ownership, even if he has ownership, but since it doesn't have the value of a shava pruta, so there is no jurisdiction over it. There's nothing you can do with it. Now, for example, another person is not allowed to steal it, but if they do steal it, you cannot take them to court, because you can't take someone to court for anything that is valuable less than a pruta. Okay, and now the real question will be, just to speak out right now, is there a difference between these two? And the answer is absolutely, as we'll see. Now let's go into the Gemara. Says the Gemara, that when we heard these two opinions, initially, we thought that one is excluding the reason of the other. It's either for one or for the other. It's either because she'ein ba heter achila, or only because she'ein ba din mamin. That man de ba heter achila lo ba din mamin. Uman de ba din mamin lo ba heter achila. Based on that initial understanding, we have a kasha. What's the kasha, Tanan? We learned in our Mishnah that if you're taking an esrog that is truma, but it became tamei, and in the Mishnah it was belashon zachar pasul, it's invalid. Now the question is why? And we spoke it out. We just asked the question when we learned the Mishnah. Chevra, truma tameya is something that may not be consumed by the kohen, but it may be burnt, and the kohen is allowed to use the burning for fuel, for light. It means you can have, there is a din mammon. It's not mutter for consumption, but there's a din mammon. So bish loy melamando amar, that by arla, the reason why it's not valid is lefisha ein by heter achila. So it makes sense that the similarly will be that since it's takatame, you can't consume it, so it's not lochem. Which is why shapet, it makes sense why it's possible. If the one who says lefisha ein badin mamin, and as we explained that the owner has no monetary jurisdiction over it, it doesn't have the value of a pruta. So then the question will be, then why will the truma temeya be possible? Harei masika tachas tafshilei lechatchila, you use truma temeya for fuel, and therefore it has the value of a pruta. So therefore the Gemara says the following. When Hashem says lochem, if anything may not be consumed, you cannot say it's yours. And everyone agrees to that. And that's why, if it's truma temeya, it's possible. Ki pligi, the question is, bidin mamain, do you have, is there also a necessity? In other words, even when you can eat it, listen to this guys, there can be something that you can eat, but you can't say that you have balabatashkeit over it. And whether that lack of jurisdiction over it will also make it considered that it's not lochem. Now what are we talking about? So let me just speak it out by heart. Rashi brings down from a Sechtes Kedushin Nun Beis Amid Beis the big machlokes concerning Meiser Sheni, which the owner gets to eat all of the products of Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim. The question is, how does one view the Meiser Sheni? You get to eat it. The question is it called Mamoin Gavoya? Is it God's? But since it grew in your field, you, so to say, get to eat it. You have the jurisdiction over it. You get to share it. No one can take it from you. But when you eat it, it's not yours. You're eating from God's table. That's Shitas Rabbi Meir, and the Chachamim hold that Meiser Sheni is Mamin Hedyet. Lamay Nafkimina, for example, in Kedushin, what happens if you take your Meiser Sheni and you give it to a woman, Hareyat Mekudesheli? If it's called Mamin Gavoya, then the Kedushin won't be effective because it's not yours. You get to eat it, but you don't have any jurisdiction over it. The Chachamim hold that the woman is Mekodeshes. Now everything fits. In other words, everyone holds that in order for you to fulfill the mitzvah of Esrog, it has to be yours, meaning you have to be allowed to eat it. The Truma Tamei is out, puzzle. Meiser Sheni. Now our Mishnah mentioned Meiser Sheni. Now we're going to see whether our Mishnah is only following Chachamim or whether our Mishnah can also follow Rab Meir. Let's read it inside. Mar Savar, that only heter achila bo'inan, but din mamain loy bo'inan. Umar Savar, the other one of these two that they mentioned that the reason why an arla is not okay, esrog of arla, is because there's no din mamain. He holds that not only do you need to be able to eat something for it to be considered lochem, you also have to have monetary jurisdiction over it. Din mami nami ba'inan, and my benayu ikir benayu meiser sheni in Yerushalayim. Only according to Rabbi Meir that holds that meiser sheni is called mamin gavoya. Laman the amar lefi. Let me just go ahead.
Yerushalayim, can't you sell your meiser sheni to some other person that will eat it there?
No, you cannot. According to Rabbi Meir, it's not yours to sell. Well, 1 second, I take that back. You can sell it because you can. No, I don't.
There's a market in Yerushalayim for meiser sheni. Just has to be eaten. It doesn't have to be eaten by you, does it?
Doesn't have to be eaten by you, but it's not. You cannot be mekadosh a woman with it. So l'choira daniyah with l'choira. You have to go back into kedushin. According to Rabbi Meir, there's no bailus. You know what, Danny? L'choira, you can't. If someone steals it from you, let's go. If someone stole it from you in Yerushalayim, according to Rav Meir, they cannot take you to Beis Din. That's called you don't have full jurisdiction over it. So I wonder whether you can sell it or not. It's not yours to sell. You can eat it. You can share it, but it's not yours. What we're looking for is whether you can be mekadosh a woman. That's what Rashi brings over here. Okay, so in the Gemara, Laman the Amar Lefisha Ein B'Heter Achila Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim you are allowed to eat. And when the Mishnah says, my friends, that if you took an esrog of Meiser Sheni Yerushalayim, the Mishnah says B'di'ev. Now why can't you take it lechatchila? We'll see in Amud Beis. When the Mishnah says that if im not al kosher, our Mishnah is going l'kol alma. But Laman the Amar, when he explains the reason why Arla, Esrog Arla is not good, is because even though aside of the issue that you can't eat it, Lefisha Ein Badin Mamain, so according to Rav Meir, Meiser Sheni Mamin Gavayohu, and therefore it must be, Chavre, this is important, that our Mishnah is not Rabbi Meir. Our Mishnah says, but the evidence good. And now the Gemara says, now that I clarified this machlokes, so initially we don't know who says what. It's Rab Chia and Abasi. Now I'll tell you, to Stayim, I'll prove to you that Rabbi Asi is the one that added, not only do you need to be allowed to eat it for it to be considered lachem, you also have to have balabatishkeit over it for it to be considered lachem. Lefisha ein badin mamoim. How do I know that? To Amar Abasi, look in this. He said clearly, Esroig shel meiser sheni. L'Rabbi Meir, clearly not like our Mishnah, because the Mishnah is lachachamim. Ein adam yoytzu ba yedei chavasa b'yamtev even b'di'evet. You are allowed to eat it. So what? It's called mamin gavoya. You can't be mekadosh a woman. It's not yours. and only ledivrei chachamim adam yoytze bo yedei chavasa beyantiv. And the fact that Rabbi Asi is the one that made that statement, so it must be that by Orla, Rabbi Asi is the one that's insisting of this concept of din mamoin. Indeed, testayim datzaraya. And now let's continue to quote this statement that we just began in the name clearly of Rabbi Asi. Gufa we learned above. Amar Rabbi Asi. Esrik shamai shel sheni. As we just spoke out, ledivrei Rabbi Meir, ein adam yoytze bo yedei chavasa beyamtiv. There's no din mammon, it's not yours. But l'divrei chachamim, it's considered mammon hedyet. You can be mekadosh a woman with it. Adam yoytze bo yedei chavasa beyantiv. Yeah, Danny, I think you cannot sell it. That's the whole Rameh. It's not yours to sell. If you can't be mekadosh a woman with it, it's not yours to sell. You can share it. It's not even you sharing it, it's God sharing it. Okay. Now let's see whether we can apply this to two other dinim. And the biggest chiddush now will be the din of a matzah. Now, Chavra, nowhere does it say in the Torah that matzah, by esrog it says lochem. Clear, yours. We're going to see in a moment when you have a dough from Ma'aser Sheni, are you mechuyev to separate challah or not? By challah in Parsha Shalach it says reishis arisoy seichem, the first of your dough. By matzah it doesn't say matzaschem. Nevertheless, Rav Asi is going to give a din based on a premise that the matzah that we use to be yoytze, the kazayas matzah, has to be yours. So now comes the same question. Can a person fulfill their obligation of eating matzah if it came from flour of Ma'aser Sheni, your Ma'aser Sheni, that you took to Yerushalayim? Matzah shel Ma'aser Sheni, the same thing. Ledivrei Rabbi Meir, ein adam yoytze bo yedei chavasa b'Pesach. Now guys, just to add something very important, this statement of Rav Asi is only l'shitasoi that says that if there isn't a din mamoin, it's not lochem. According to now we know Rab Chia holds the only thing that removes something from lochem is something that you may not eat. In other words, according to Rab Chia, even according to Rav Meir, of course you can be yoytze yedei chayvasoi of matzah, even though, Rav Meir holds that Ma'aser Sheni is mammon gavoya, so what? The bottom line is that you are allowed to eat it. But Rav Asi, l'shitase, will hold that Rav Meir, you're not going to be yoytz. And only l'divrei chachamim adam yoytze bo yedei chavasi b'Pesach. Now, bottom line in halacha, it won't make an afkamina, because as we see, we paskin like the chachamim. We paskin that Ma'aser Sheni is considered mammon hedyet. And the third, the end of the narrow line in the bottom of the Amid, Isa shel Ma'aser Sheni. If you make a dough from Ma'aser Sheni kernels, from Ma'aser Sheni wheat, from Ma'aser Sheni barley, etc., from the 5 minim, ledivrei Rav Meir p'tura min hachala. Even though you are allowed to eat it. Again, dough has to be yours, and the way Rav Asi defines yours is not only that you're allowed to eat it, but you have you're the balabas. It's your money. You can be mekadosh a woman with it. And since you are not allowed to do it, it won't be effective. You're mekadosh a woman, she will not be mekodeshes. L'Rav Meir is the charaya that there's no din mammon. It's not yours. There's no obligation to separate challah. That's a kula. Only the divrei chachamim chayevas b'challah. And now the Gemara is going to ask, Maskav Rav Papa, third line from the bottom, hold on. Bishlem, when it comes to a dough, to the mitzvah of separating challah, as it says in Parsha Shlach, Reishis Arisoy Seichem, your dough. Esrig Namei, as we're learning our sugya, it says, Lokachtem Lochem, and as we learned above, Lochem means Mishel Lochem. Masha'en Kein Matzah, Miksiv Matzaschem. Who says it has to be yours? Answers the Gemara, Amar Rabba bar Shmuel. Or V'itema, the answer was given by Rav Yemar bar Shelemia. That according to Rab Asi, he had the following Gezerah Shava, and the Gezerah is from the words bread, lechem, lechem. Ksiv, it says regarding matzah, and we're quoting a pasuk in Parshas Re'eh, lechem oini, right? We had in Psachim, lechem she'oinin oleh devarim harbe. Or one of the interpretations is the bread of affliction. But we're focusing on the words lechem. And it says Hassan, meaning in Shlach, concerning the mitzvah of separating chalach and daf lamed hey yomid beis, that v'hoya ba'acholchem milechem ha'aretz. So what do we do? Mala halon, just like by the challah, Because the Torah says, Arisoi Seichem, we learn that Mishalochem, and if it's not yours, however you define yours, it's exempt from the obligation of separating challah. And therefore, according to Rabbi Meir, that holds that Meiser Sheni is Mamen Gavoya, Meiser Lekula. You make a dough in Yerushalayim, you're going to be the one eating it. You don't separate Meiser, you don't separate challah to give it to a kohen. Afkan, when it comes to matzah, when are you able to be yoitzeh? Only mishalachem. And therefore, you cannot fulfill your obligation of eating the kazayas of matzah if it was made from your, so to say, what we would call your meiser sheni. V'loy misal meiser. Says the Gemara, Leima, perhaps.
Refer to matzah as lechem many times?
I missed that tzemach.
Don't we refer to matzah as lechem many times? All over we call it lechem.
Yeah, where?
In Lach Ma'anya.
That's not a pasuk in Torah. No, what Tzemach is asking is that why did we quote lechem from Parshas Re'eh? Tzemach is asking, is there nowhere prior to Parshas Re'eh where the Torah uses the words lechem?
Yes.
So I want to say like this, that first of all, maybe not. And even if you're going to find the Chumash later and call me up excited, I found lechem. So when it comes to Gezerah Shavas, there are times that when two things are dissimilar logically, you can only use a word for a Gezerah Shava if it's mufna, if it's extra. So this is for sure the only extra lechem, but it could be tzemach that whoever's really bucky in the whole Chumash by heart, go through quickly in your computer, and that's just a good observation. In other words, if you're going to find the word lechem before the A, you have to show why that lechem was not superfluous for it to be used for the Gezerah Shava. Okay, 3 lines from the top on Lamed Hamad base. Now the Gemara says, hold on, this is a big chiddush of Rabasi. So Leime Misayele, perhaps I'll prove, at least I'll find a Braisa that backs up Rabasi. What's the Braisa? Isa shol Meiser Sheni, Petura Menachala, Divrei Rav Meir. V'chacham Emayim Chayeves B'chala. Now, by the way, this is great. In other words, here we found a Braisa that clearly speaks out, Machloikis, Rav Meir and the Chachamim, whether you're obligated to separate challah from a dough made out of Meiser Sheni. It's not only a great siyua. You know what a siyua means? As a raya, it's more than a raya, it's befedish. So the Gemara is, not only are we accepting, but we're asking, why are you calling it a Misayeya? Lema Misayeya le, frek the Gemara. No, he, that's mamashit. So the Gemara says, no. Yeah, by challah, clear. Now that we found the Braisa, we don't need the Rabasi. The question is by matzah. You don't find any Tana being Magala that by a matzah there is an obligation of yours, and therefore, the way Rav Asi understands Rab Meir, you have to have din mamain. You will also exclude your permissibility to be yoitza, your ability to be yoitza from matzah meiser sheni. Elo, what the chiddush is that midahachi pligi, clearly by challah there's an argument. Baha nami pligi. Do we say automatically that they also argue concerning, let's say, esreg also, and matzah? Or maybe without Rabasi, one might have said, no, by the dough, the Torah doesn't only write once yours, Arisoi Seichem, it's actually written twice. Arisoi Seichem Terei Zimne. By Esreg, there's only one Slachem. By Matzah, Meiser Sheni, there's one Gezerah Shava, let's say like that. So without Rav Asi, we wouldn't have known it for sure from a Braisa. But hold on, but Rav Asi does come, and he says, no, you don't need to have the Arisoi Seichem twice. That Arisoi Seichem means yours. Yours doesn't only mean Heter Achila, yours means Din Mammon. And therefore Lit Rav Meir, and therefore the same thing will be by a Esreg, and the same thing will be by a Matzah. What's quite amazing from our Sugya is that no one here argues with Rav Asi. So now, the Balabatasha application will be, my friends, if I am eating in your house for the Sadarim, am I going to be yotzed my mitzvah of eating matzah if I eat matzah from your table? Bachlal, there's a shaila, we spoke this out a few times way back. If I'm a guest in your table, and you serve me a piece of chicken, and the guest who's eating the chicken has next to him his wife to be, a woman who he wants to give kedushin to. If he takes kedushin, if he takes that chicken, This is a people that are from certain cultures fully identify with that. Perfect. Now I got a pruta. Why should I spend out of my pocket the pruta? Give your chicken to this woman and say Hareh Mekodeshesli. What's the status of the food that I am eating on your table? Is it yours, but I'm not a ganef because you are sharing it with me? Or the moment it's on my plate, or if it's already in my fork, it's considered mine? Now, if you say the latter, it's considered mine after a certain point, so then there's no issue with me being a guest on your table. But if we view food of a guest always to be the food of a balabas, did anyone ever tell you that if you have guests, you have to make sure that you makna to them the matzah? That's an interesting theoretical issue that comes up when we learn the sugya over here. Okay, let's go right. The next din of the Mishnah was v'shel truma tameya. The Mishnah said categorically it's psula. You won't fulfill your obligation. And here, what did we just learn above? That even the Manda Amar that says you also need din mamain, it's an also. Everyone agrees that if you are not allowed to eat something, it's not called yours. So truma temeya, like we mentioned, is allowed to be burnt, but truma temeya may not be consumed. So therefore, since the leisba heter achila, so lekula alma bein lerabchia, bein lerabchia, bein lerabasi, it's excluded from the lachem, even on a b'diavad level, and therefore psula. Next, shel truma tohira. Here the Mishnah says, at depends. The Mishnah says, lo yito. Guys, if you remember, lo yito means lechatchila, don't take it. But b'diavad, you're yoitz. So now let's explain why should you lechatchila not take it. Guys, truma tohira is allowed to be eaten. Truma tohira is under the jurisdiction, it's under the balabatishkeit of the kohen to whom you gifted the truma. So what's the issue? So here we have another machlokes. Pligabar of Ami v'Ravasi. Chad Amar, the reason why lechatchila don't use an esrik, that's truma tohira for the mitzvah, because mepnei machshira, because you render it susceptible to becoming tamei. What does that mean? As we learn that when it comes to food items, not only is it never even muksher lekabel tuma, it's not even susceptible when it's connected, even after you cut it off the ground, even after you harvested it, prior to it ever becoming wet. Before it's wetted, it's not muksher lekabel tuma. And being that it was common practice, as it is today, for people to take the bundle of the lulav, hadas, and arava, and for them to keep it in a jug of water, it's wet, the lulav bundle is wet. And let's go more, not the way we learned yesterday, the Bahag, but dafka, the way that Rabbeinu Tam spoke out. And that's the Minhag Yisrael. That not only do we take the four minim together, even though we don't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, that's sorech eget, but we make a bundle, zakei levi anveyu, and we bring the esrek to the lulav. That's the way people take the arbas aminim. And therefore, since it's a fact, it doesn't have to be that way, but de facto, the lulav is wet. When you do the mitzvah and you put the esrik to the bundle, you will wet the esrik. Now, it doesn't mean it's tameh yet, but if you're going to use the esrik for the mitzvah, you're bringing it one step closer to tumah, because now you're going to be machshir it like kabel tumah. So that's why lechatchila don't use it. That's one reason. Beautiful. The other one of these two say, because you spoil, let me just add the words, you spoil part of it. As we all know, when you use the esrik for the mitzvah, it's a matter of time before the outer part becomes a little bit brown, it becomes used. And the famous story when they asked the Rebbe, who was mezaka everyone to do the bracha, at least on the Rebbe's lulav and esrik. So we have thousands of people taking the Rebbe's lulav and esrik, which was the most beautiful arbas minim that we were able to find for the Rebbe. Even after one day, the esrik lost some of its beauty. Actually, already during Yom Tov, you can even say it got a little bit brown. So someone once asked the Rebbe, Hadar. And the Rebbe responded that what greater Hadar is there, an esrik, that thousands of Yidden used it for a mitzvah. But coming back over here, it does lose a little bit of its luster. It can even become a little bit brown. And we are told, this is important, when there is an obligation to guard, we have to guard. Guarding doesn't only mean to guard it from tumah, but we have to keep it as beautiful as we could. So since at least the outer, the peel gets ruined, that's why lechatchila don't use it. And what nafkamina will there be between these two reasons? And the Gemara gives a great nafkamina. In other words, when you are mafresh, when you are mafresh truma, you know what you are able to do? Truma is a percent. And by the way, it's not, dafka to approximate. Approximately 2%. If you have a pile of esrogim, it's not about separating one esrog. The amount that you separated for truma should be more or less 2%. Therefore, you know what you are able to do? You are able, shekara all of shame, chutz mikli pasach chitzayna. You can say, I want almost this esrog to become truma, not the outer klipa, not the outer peel. The outer peel remains non-truma. Now, what did you benefit from that? If the reason why lachatchila you shouldn't take it is because mepnei shemach shira, because you are going to render it susceptible to becoming tamei, I don't care if the outer peel is not truma. I don't care. It's the fruit. If it will get wet when you use it for the mitzvah, if it gets wet, the whole fruit now is moksha lekabel tumah. The concern remains lachatchila don't take it. But if the only reason is because you're going to spoil it, what part may you not spoil? The truma part of it. The outer klipa, if the outer klipa is not truma, you're not spoiling truma. Danny loves this. He's whoever can answer, Danny is so happy with this nafkamina, it's amazing. So then there is no concern, and then lachatchila you can take it.
How can you make a fruit half truma and half?
Yeah, that's what we're learning right now. That's the beauty. So we're learning something new every day. We don't know it all. We know nothing. The Eibusher's Torah is complicated. It's good. It's complex. You can take a fruit and say that part of it is truma. Now, what are you going to do? You're going to have to give it to the kohen anyways. But this is a person who wants for the kohen to be able to use it for the dalad minim, and they learn to Gemara. So they're giving this to the kohen. Now the kohen doesn't have to spend the $800 for the esrog. He has the esrog for free. It's his esrog. It's definitely mammon of the kohen. And
but I thought you have to want it willingly to get wet. So it's
so Kavan is asking, you have to want it willingly. That's called willingly, because if you remember, it's yutan yitain. Willingly means that once you are using it for the mitzvah, but
you don't want it to get wet.
Obviously, this is considered enough willingness. If not, you can argue, as far as tumah is concerned, no one wants the produce to get wet for tumah. But they want it to get wet if they want it to look fresh. They want it to you want to use it for the mitzvah, that's called you want it to get wet. Okay. Now, however, v'im natal, continuing with the truma tahira, then it's kosher. Now, why is it kosher? So we have to always go back today to the two dinim that we learned on Amud Aleph. Is it lochem heter achila? Or is it lochem, you also have to have the din mammon. So laman the amar, that all we need to look for by the orla is she'ein ba heter achila. So why is at least b'di'evid, why will you fulfill your obligation by using the esrog of truma tohira? Hadei yesh ba heter achila, because you are allowed to eat it. A very important Rashi over here. Who are we talking about? Who has heter achila? So don't apply the Mishnah's din only for a kohen. Well, a kohen clearly is allowed to eat truma. Continues Rashi that even a non-kohen will be able to fulfill his obligation b'di'evid, putting aside the machshira mafsida. Why? Not because a Yisrael is allowed to eat truma. God forbid, Rashi says, a Yisrael is never allowed to eat truma. But since if a Yisrael, for example, has a grandchild that's a kohen, your daughter married a kohen, so your enikol is a kohen. The Yisrael is allowed to give this to eat to his kohen grandchild. Not that it's ever allowed to be redeemed. Rashi writes, whoever learns this Gemara is, so to say, hinting that you can somehow redeem truma is a rasha. Very strong words. Heter achila doesn't mean that you have to be allowed to eat it. It means that you have the right to gift it to someone that can eat it. That's called heter achila. So then it's good, back inside the Gemara, Laman the Amar, that not only to make sure this fits in the lochem, does it need to have heter achila, but also, Lefisha ein ba din mammon, you have to have monetary jurisdiction, yesh ba din mammon. What does it mean? Number one, a kohen can give truma to hoira to be mekadesh a wife. Or furthermore, Rashi writes that a yid, right? What happens if a Jew received truma tohira? A yid, you know what the yid can do? A Yisrael, he can be mekadesh a woman with it. What is the woman going to do with it? She cannot eat it if she's not a kohen, but she can sell it to a kohen. Now, just to know that the prices for truma will always be cheaper than the prices of regular food because there's a lesser of a demand, because very few people are allowed to eat it. So therefore it's cheaper, doesn't matter, but it's worth a pruta. So the point is that whether it's heter achila, whether it is din mamain, not only a kohen, Rashi points out, even a Yisrael who may never eat it himself, still, it's called that they are permitted, it's permitted for consumption. They can gift it to a kohen, and they have monetary jurisdiction, using again, like we had on Ma'aseh Sheni that I've made, whether you can be mekadosh a woman with it, and therefore, b'di'evet, putting aside the machshira, mafsida, it's good. Next, shel demai, so in the Mishnah we had a machlokes between Beis Shammai, Poislin, Ubeis Hillel, machshirin, what's that machlokes about? My tama de Beis Hillel, in other words, l'choida, let's go back, l'kula alma, you have to be allowed to eat it, we are not allowed to eat the mai as it is. How can you fulfill your obligation? So answers the Gemara, since kiven the I boya mafkiluhu lenichse, if this person would have wanted to, if he would have been mafker, if he would declare ownerless everything that he owns, and just like that become a ani, he can become an ani, and according to Beis Hillel, only Beis Hillel, an ani was never included in this takana of not eating the mai prior to taking again some of the trumas u'maisres, because really even in the times where people got lax, the majority of the people separated all the trumas and all the maisres. It was only an important minority that didn't. So that was a chumrah. And therefore, according to Beis Hillel, it was never put upon aniyim. So we say this concept of hashti nami lochem koninon bei. It's potentially yours because you could become an ani. And ditnan, a Mishnah in demai machilin esuaniyim demai, or and ve'es achsanya. Achsanya, Rashi says, are traveling soldiers, even if those soldiers are Jews. But normally the people, the citizens of any locale, were obligated to take in as a guest traveling soldiers. Halachically, Danny's shaking his head, what's the issue? That traveling soldiers have a din of an ani. Doesn't matter how wealthy the soldier is in his bank account at home, you don't have access to that, especially before technology. You have the status of an ani. So therefore, again, since the I boya mafkiluhu lenichse, it's as if for this you are already an ani. Now, Beis Shammai oimrim, Beis Shammai, indeed, Beis Shammai argues with the premise that Beis Shammai can agree with the I boya mafkid is enough, but it wouldn't help you. Lo yachol demai. And therefore, Beis Shammai says that if someone used an esrei shel demai, poislin, you did not fulfill your obligation. Why? Because it's not lochem. Why is it not lochem? Because it's never permitted for you for consumption when it's still demai. And indeed, the Tanan, quoting again a Mishnah in demai, machilin esonim demai v'sachsanya demai, we just quoted that Mishnah again, but you should know that Amar, Rav Huna, I want you to know that the Mishnah didn't quote a machlokes. But I found a braisa that quotes a machlokes. Tanach, Beis Shammai yoimrim ein machilin esonim v'sachsanya demai. Only Beis Hillel oimrim machilin esonim v'sachsanya demai. In other words, the Mishnah is only Shitas Beis Hillel. So we're making a beautiful Lishita sum that our Mishnah, again, this is beautiful, everyone can subscribe to, since you could have been Mafkir your Nechasim. If that would have been effective, it would be enough to consider the Esrik Lochem, but Beis Shammai disagrees with the premise. Let's go weiter. The next case in the Mishnah was Shal Ma'aseh Sheni in Yerushalayim. Again, what did it say in the Mishnah? Right, Lachatchila b'di'evet. So Lo Yitel. However, v'im not all kosher, and again we learned the Mishnah with Rashi. Other Rishonim strongly disagree. Rashi makes it clear. I'm just going back to Lamed Aleph Lamed Beis, that the Mishnah's b'di'evid. I think I lost the connection. The Mishnah's b'di'evid, the permissibility, chaval, of taking. What are we talking about?
Recording in progress.
The Mishnah's permissibility of taking Ma'aser Sheni. I'm sorry about that. Okay, we're going to have to make a wire here. A physical wire will help. The Mishnah's permissibility is only Ma'aser Sheni in Yerushalayim. Rashi wrote in the Mishnah that Ma'aser Sheni chutz li Yerushalayim, even with the evidence, not good. Now let's again, we're going to just bring it back to the base of the ikar of today's daf. On Amad Aleph. Laman the Amar, going back to the Arla, the Machloikas by Arla, that the reason why you're not Yoitza by Arla is Mapnei she'ein ba heter achila. So why are you Yoitza with Ma'aser Sheni? Why? Then the Divrei Hakol. Then even according to Rav Meir, it would be good enough. According to Rav Meir, you don't have monetary jurisdiction because it's mamain gavaya. If all you need for the lachem is to be allowed to eat it, then it's going to be good. But like we learned in Amadallah, but Lamanda Amar, that you also need to have lefisha ein ba din mammon, that the reason why the esrog of artel is not good is because there's no din mammon. That's another reason. Then it must be that our Mishnah only follows the Rabbanan, because aliba de Rabbi Meir, who holds meiser sheni mammon gavoya, it's not lochem, and even b'di'evet it won't be good. Okay, and now we're going to the part of the Mishnah that began to speak about physical blemishes, not halachic blemishes, beginning with also chazazis, if boils or scabs developed on the periphery of the esrig, then the Mishnah wrote it's not hadar, right? It's going to be pasul. So Amar Rab Chizda, I want you to know that davar zeh Rabbeinu Hagadol Amru. The following statement came from our great master. This is Rav, and Zol Gesund sein Hamakim, or here it's may God help him. Hamakim yeh be'ezrei. That what? That lo yishana l'b'makom echad. The first understanding is that when do we say that when boils cover the majority, it's pasul? That's only if it's contiguous. Contiguous means, let's see if you find a picture. I don't think that's the right picture, but we have a picture today. Good. Contiguous means that the boiled area, what he's showing now is not boils. Whoever's looking at the screen, that's the normal look of an esrog. The normal bumps, the ups and downs, it's something that's not pretty, something that's not usual. Okay. So if it's contiguous and it's covering the roiv of the surface, then it's not good. That's the initial understanding. But if it's not in one area, it's in 2 or 3 or more areas, even if you were to measure it, the sum total will be roiv. Since it's not b'makom echad, it's going to be kosher. That was the initial understanding of Rab Chizda quoting his teacher, the great Rabbeinu Hagadol, meaning Rav. However, the Gemara says that cannot be what he said. Amar lei Rava. Right, where's the Bach? Where is the Bach? Take out the word lei, says the Bach. Amar Rava, it can't be. Because Adarabah. If you have this chazazis spread out on different places, then it's even worse. Haverlei kimenumar, it's speckled. Speckled or spotted is not hadar. Zikr pasal. And we accept his criticism, and now we clarify what the Rav really said. Really, Rav made a statement on the Sefer, which is al meyutai, that if you have chazazis, but chazazis doesn't cover the majority of the surface, says the Mishnah, it's kosher. On that, Amar Rab Chizda, hold on, not so quick. I'm going to limit the heter. Davar zeh Rabbeinu Hagadol Amirai and v'hamakim yeh be'ezroi lo yishana lo makam echad. If it's only in one place and it's miut, then it's okay. Aval, but if b'shnayim u'shloishim mekayimos, even though it doesn't cover the roiv, since it makes the esrog spotted, speckled, havalekim enumar and opasul. Another detail. In other words, Rava came ahead and he explains that Rav is not qualifying the psul, making more asregim kosher, fakert. He's making more asregim pasul. And now he's coming with another chumrah. Again, when the Mishnah writes, at least if it's in one place, right, and it's not the majority, it's miyutai, then it's good. Not always. If the boil is on the nose of the esrog, people's eyes naturally linger on the section that's called the nose. There, even if there's one little chazazis, it's also going to be pasul. Now, question is, where is the nose? Rashi has a very broad application. That's a chumrah of where the nose is. He says that you take the esrog, so towards the top. Normally, it's the third top where it goes from broad and it begins to slope upwards. Anywhere that's sloping upwards is already called the nose. That is the shita of Rashi. I want you to know that prior to it becoming acceptable for amongst the Fruma people of pictures to be taken, right? What was the issue that many people argued that loisasa lo chapesel v'chol temuna? So even the Rebbe, you should know that in the earlier years, when someone took a picture of the Rebbe, he would scratch his nose, dafka the nose, because halachically the panim is your nose. And if your nose is a little bit covered, that it's not a problem. Later, it became accepted. The Rebbe said that the Friedrich Rebbe, even though that for Ruchnius the Kenyanim, if a person passes away and there's pictures of them in this world, it does not allow them to go to the level that they could have gone. It's detrimental to them. The Rebbe said that the reason why the Friedrich Rebbe allowed them to take pictures, halachically it became acceptable, but even al pi Kabbalah, because even though for him it's detrimental, it's beneficial for the Hasidim. And that's a Rebbe, that he does what's better for the people, even if it's to his detriment, al pi Ruchnius. Anyways, coming back over here, Rava, in other words, Rava has two chumras. First of all, he clarified that if it's in a few places, chazazis, it's invalid. Speckled is not beautiful. If it's only on the nose, then also it's not going to be valid. Let's hop on another few lines. You should know, nitla, the next thing in the Mishnah was, nitla pit masai, that if the pitim was removed, so if an esrig naturally had a pitim and now it's removed, so it's chaser. That's even a worse invalidation than hidur. I want you to know, says the Gemara, that there's a Braisa that Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar says, and he's just giving another name to the pitim. And he called the pitim nitla buchnasa. A buchna means a pestle. In other words, the pitim resembles a pestle. He would give it another name, just to have clarity. We learned yesterday about names. Which one as it is? The pitim removed this chassid. Now that comes to exclude, we had a picture before on the screen, that on top of the pitim you have the shoishanta. The shoishanta is already not considered part of the esrik proper. So if there's a little blemish in the crown or in the flower that's on top of the pitim, that's not that problematic. The pitim, the green pitim, that if it has a pitim naturally, removing it invalidates the esrik. Next, and then in the Mishnah, niklaf, if the esrik was peeled, again, the Mishnah said that the esrig is not valid. Now Rava, the same Rava, is coming with a leniency. When do we say that if the esrig is peeled is not kosher? Well, as we'll see in a moment, that's only if it's not peeled in its entirety. Guys, we're not speaking about the rind. That's the peta. We're speaking only about the outermost layer of the skin. If that's peeled, the Mishnah says it's not valid. However, Amar Rava, high esrog, if you have an esrog, the iglid that it was peeled, you know how much? Ke'ahina sumka. Now it looks like a reddened date. You know, date has a reddish tinge, which means everything was peeled. When you peel it, the color changes. But it was entirely peeled. Says Rava Ksheira. Wow. So the Gemara challenges Rava. How? The last line in the Amid V'hanan Tanan, did we not learn in our Mishnah that Niklav Pasul? Answers the Gemara Loi Kasha, Daf Lamed Vav. Rashi, Gemara Rashi, Ha Bechula, says Rashi, Rava's statement was that all of the outer skin was peeled off. Only the outer skin. And therefore, it's not speckled. It's not spotted. It has the same appearance. It went from yellow-greenish, it went to a reddish. That's taka kosher. Our Mishnah that invalidates niklaf, again, not chaser because it's only the outer peel. You know why it's possible? Because it's not beautiful. Why is it not beautiful? Because only it was b'miktsas. It was not peeled all over. Some of it is peeled, some of it is unpeeled. So now the colors look speckled, they look spotted. This is so, it's reminding me of the Parshas Vayetze, right? By Yaakov Avinu, by the Tzoin Lavan, that what shocked the sheep. In nature, you don't have something that's so unsymmetric. Not everything is perfect. That's what we have to add to the world. But to have a little spot here and a little spot there, it's going to be green here, it's going to be red there. That is the lack of hidur, and that is the case where the Mishnah says that pasul, God willing, to be continued.